the Linux desktop environments has been an untenable situation, and I'm very happy with Lumina. I use it every day now. This has also been working a lot on the server offering of TrueOS, and are pleased to provide a new text-based server images with support for virtualization such as Beehive. This allows for simple server deployment, which takes advantage of the TrueOS improvements to FreeBSD, including the OpenRC stuff that we just talked about, reliable non-interactive system update mechanism with fail-safe boot environment support,
Excellent.
graphical management of remote TrueOS servers using sysadm. So you can use the sysadm API to use a graphical machine to manage a bunch of headless servers. They use LibreSSL as the SSL library everywhere. And the base system is managed with packages rather than being separate like in FreeBSD. And the base system is smaller due to the removal of things like the old version of GCC. And actually, all compilers are not installed by default. You install them from the ports tree. And this allows you to pick whichever one you want. If you want a newer or older Clang version, or if you want a newer or older GCC version.
Yeah, it's right there for the taking or for installing it, but it's not part of the base system once you install it.
Yep. And they also, because it's based on FreeBSD's head revision, they have support for newer graphics and Wi-Fi drivers sooner rather than later. It's the main reason why TrueOS is based on FreeBSD 12 instead of 11 is to get those driver updates sooner.
Yeah, people who require that can get them sooner than waiting for the next FreeBSD release.
Yep. So version 17.12 is now available for download from the TrueOS website. It's available as both the stable and unstable package repositories, and they're currently in sync, so current users may need to follow the prompts to update their system to the new version. They're also announcing the availability of TrueOS sponsorships. If you'd like to help contribute to the project, they have information on their website there. But some of the notable changes are they've updated 1,100 OpenRC service definitions, so that third-party packages from ports and so on will just integrate into OpenRC nicely. The OpenRC services of FreeBSD itself have all been overhauled, resulting in a much shorter booting time. They've got separate install images for desktops and servers because they include different default packages and so on, and support for Beehive on the server version. And they're currently using the FreeBSD-based system from December 4th, so it's very fresh. Although the ports tree was snapshotted November 30th before the flavors changed, because that was a very big change too close to the release.
Yeah, that would have affected a little bit more than just a simple update. This is more in the innards of the port system.
Yep, the Lumina desktop's been updated, and PCDM, the TrueOS login manager, and now supports multiple graphical sessions at once. And the removable device auto mounter service has been improved a lot. Devices are announced as available to the system via the desktop shortcuts in /media. These shortcuts also contain a variety of optional actions, such as, mount it, automatically unmounted when you stop using it, integrated support for UFS, EXT, FAT, NTFS, EXFAT, and a bunch of others. And the TrueOS update system has moved to an active update backend. This means that the user will need to actually start the update process by clicking Update Now. And then sysadm, Lumina, and PCDM will also work that way. The staging of the update files is still performed automatically by default, but this and many other options can easily be changed in the update manager. I know that was my biggest problem with TrueOS on one of my laptops, was every time I was shutting it down because I was like trying to leave or get on an airplane or something, it was like, oh, I'm going to install some updates. I'm like, how about not right now? I'm kind of busy.
It's like over in Windows land they do that, yeah. But yeah, it's people should be aware of that, and yeah, that it's happened or can happen.
Yeah, and they have number of interesting links in the article there, including the forums, their bug tracker, their handbook, and also their community Telegram chat.
Oh, nice. They're pretty much everywhere where there's a way to communicate with them. They also have a known errata at the end, or a little more to the end of the document about box. So apparently, when running FreeBSD within a VirtualBox VM, is known to occasionally receive non-existent mouse clicks, which is kind of bad for a GUI environment, but yeah, it's good to know, particularly when using the scroll wheel or two-finger scroll. So people should be aware of that and retry it rather than blaming the operating system. It's a known problem with VirtualBox and FreeBSD combination. Maybe the next version will fix that.
It's interesting that it's that way around, that it's clicks I didn't do showing up rather than, I clicked and nothing happened.
Yeah, it's some kind of weird interaction there that could be fixed for people to get a better desktop experience. Because clicking is kind of the way of interacting with a desktop environment, and if the clicks aren't received, then okay, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff also in their ports updates. They have all the versions that the release will ship with, and people should check out and try the release and give feedback, and thanks also for things that work, and when people are using it, feedback is important for the developers to know that they're developing a system that's been used and is actually fulfilling its purpose. All right, our next story is about the OpenBSD workstation. So we have a guide here, and it talks about how to build a proper OpenBSD workstation. It starts off with user actions. Well, the actual design goals of the thing is that user actions should complete instantaneously. So there is no surprise effect there, or that there's nothing that people will be astounded about. Well, let's start over at the beginning. So the blog post here is beginning with, so I've gone to a little old board collecting notes about what seems to be an ideal OpenBSD workstation for hackers, everything from hardware to software, though I shared with you all because many of the items on the list were a surprise to the blog post writer or the author, and I think you'll enjoy them. Feel free to write him and suggest better ideas. So design goals start, as I said, with user action should complete instantaneously. While he understands if compiling code and rendering video takes time, opening programs and moving windows should have no observable delay. The system should also use minimalist tools, so don't clutter too much the system with unneeded or stuff that no one uses or just deinstalls once they see that it's there. So corollary, the cache data offline when possible, so don't rely too much on the network being there. So everything from OpenStreetMap or to Stack Exchange that people frequent often can be stored locally. There's no reason to repeatedly hit the internet to query, and this also improves privacy because the initial download is indiscriminate, doesn't reveal personal queries or patterns of computer use and activity.
Yeah, that might be going a little overboard, downloading all of Stack Exchange in case you might have a question and don't want people to know which question you asked. But it, that's an option.
Now you should also periodically pull in the new stuff because there might be something new posted in the meantime. No idling program. So that should use a presentable off CPU. So why does the calendar agent on my MacBook sometimes use 150% CPU for 15 minutes? Who knows? I've observed similar behavior. I don't run the latest release, luckily, but there are sometimes where there's some activity there and no one knows why it's happening. So who knows? Why are background Chrome helpers chugging along at upper single-digit CPU? I didn't realize that holding a rendered document object model could be so challenging. The next point is avoid interpreted languages, web-based desktop apps, and JavaScript garbage. There, I said it. Take your Electron apps with you to DevNull. Okay, this is also a little bit extreme, but if you're on the cautious side, then yeah, people should consider it to have a good OpenBSD workstation. Stability is also important, so old-fashioned programs on a conservative operating system on quality mainstream hardware should be the thing that you should strive for. There are enough challenges to tackle without a bleeding edge system being one of them. Delegate to quality hardware components. Why use a janky N-Curse software audio mixer when you can use an actual audio mixer? Hardware privacy. No camera or microphone that I can't physically disconnect. Also real hardware protection for cryptographic keys. Yeah, people get a bunch of these screen protectors. I got this one from BBSDCon, where you can just hide the camera or put something in front of it so no one can switch on the camera while you didn't notice.
Yes, although that doesn't protect the microphone.
Yeah, this one is still, receiving. Yeah, but certainly figure out that not too many things invade your privacy in this regard. And that this is hardware privacy, there's also software privacy. Commercial software and operating systems have gotten so terrible about this. The author did even catch Mac command line tools trying to call Google Analytics, sorry homebrew, your cute emojis don't make up for the surveillance.
So looking at the core of the system, it says, to get the best hardware for the money, I'm opting for a desktop computer. I haven't had one since the early 2000s, and it feels a little anachronistic. I don't know, I still have all desktop machines here. But it will outperform a laptop for a similar cost. After much searching, they settled on the HP Z240 Tower workstation. It's a no-nonsense and supports exactly the customizations they were after. Allows you to order it with no operating system, so you don't have to pay the Windows tax. It has an Intel Xeon E3 1270 V6. Very similar. My machine is a 1275 V6, which is the same but with the integrated Intel graphics. They installed 16 gigabytes of DDR4 ECC RAM, a 256 gigabyte Z Turbo G2 PCIe SSD. So that's NVMe rather than SATA. No graphics card, they'll add their own after. And it has built-in dual Intel i210 PCIe network card. I went with a super micro board that has built-in Intel 10 gigabit, but is otherwise very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They went with a discrete video card. They got a Radeon HD 6450. I went with an NVIDIA because FreeBSD.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why build a solid computer and not protect it? Externally, they have an APC BR1300G UPS, which is exactly the same one I have.
Okay, yeah, well.
Yeah.
It works.
Nice way to protect your computer from the power outages and so on. The power here is quite good, but I found that since I started protecting my computers with APCs, I don't randomly have failing power supplies every so often.
Yeah, but you had damage from, power surges in the past.
Well, I had damage from lightning, but that came in over the cable connection and fried the switch, and nothing a battery backup could have done about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's
for
good.
Peripherals, they went with a Matias Ergo Pro mechanical switch keyboard. I have a Cooler Master Master Keys Pro L with backlight and so on. Cherry MX Blues. But for the office, we've also bought some of the Unicomp buckling spring, old-fashioned like IBM Model M type keyboards for some of the people. And since it's a home office, they also got a Brother duplex laser printer that allows raw TCP printing. I went with something similar, a Samsung that supports that's networked rather than connecting over like USB or something. It connects over Ethernet, and so I can talk to it from any computer in the house, no matter what the operating system is, which works out very nicely.
Yeah, there's a note here about this printer phoning home to Amazon.
Well, if you can buy a version from Amazon that has the Amazon Dash feature, which is the instant reordering for ink. So it will tell Amazon how much ink you have and arrange to ship you more ink when you run out.
Convenient.
Yeah, that's an Amazon feature rather than a hardware feature, but
Mm. Okay, moving on. Yeah, yeah. So audio video section.
yeah, they say, I know a lot of people enjoy being surrounding with a wall of monitors, like they're at the heart of Nash's mission control, but I find multi-monitor setup slightly disorienting. It introduces an extra bit of cognitive overhead to determine which monitor is for what, and so on. So they went with a Dell UltraSharp 24-inch. That's 1080p. I have an Asus 4K monitor on this machine here.
Okay. Yeah, there are two camps. I figure the people who say they're totally more productive with a two monitor setup or multi-monitor setup, and people who say I can only work with one and be productive this way.
I'm kind of in the middle. I have a second monitor on both my home computer and my work computer, but the second monitor mostly only holds stuff that my focus is not on.
Yeah, so some kind of monitoring thing, and that you don't have to constantly look at. And
yeah,
then there's
or like right now,
window.
it's the preview of what's going out on the stream and what's being recorded, and lets me switch shots. Whereas in front of me, I have the notes and the website and so on. Or at work, I tend not to use the second screen so much. But when gaming, it's the chat software or whatever I'm using to yell at the people I'm playing games with.
Heal me. And then if you're on the road or at a conference travel, you pretty much just have your laptop screen in front of you.
Yes.
I have people who bring multiple laptops, but
I'm one of those people, and you'll often see me.
They don't set
in
them up.
Paris, I had 3 laptops going at once, and it was a little ridiculous, especially since I had a wired Ethernet network between the 3 of them.
Oh yeah, because why not?
Yeah.
And where were we in the audio section?
So they also have a Rongzhenshan USB HDMI capture device they use to capture video, and a C Media device here that they use for audio.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a mixer, which is looks like a slightly smaller version of what we have here for the show that we use on the road, and quite a fancy microphone.
Oh yeah. So
for backups, they have an actual tape drive here, an LTO-N.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there are pictures in the blog post for each of those components, so people can check them out and see what they look like with links.
And the SCSI controller they use for the tape drive here is pictured.
Wait, did you say SCSI controller?
Yep.
Isn't that?
It's an
that's
old SCSI tape drive.
Ah, okay. Because I was like, well, moment. That is someone is still using SCSI, but for the tape drive, that's okay.
Yeah, they have an AdaptDec 29320 for the tape drive. For cryptography, they say you don't want to generate and store secret keys on a general purpose network attached computer. The attack surface is a mile wide. Generating or manipulating offline secret keys needs to happen in a separate computer with no network access. So they say little boards like the Raspberry Pi would be good, except these ARM processors are incompatible with the Tails OS and have Wi-Fi. So he's using a Jaguar board, a small x86 machine with no wireless capabilities. Just switch the keyboard and mouse over to this machine, and you have your little clean room for generating keys and so on. However, generating keys requires entropy, and the Linux kernel in the Tails OS that they use some properties to generate randomness, but that doesn't really give a case. And so they have a little USB device that they're using as a source of entropy.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
this is the one RNG.
Oh, right. They have a driver for that. Yeah.
And another one they were looking at is the BitBabbler. They also have an OpenGPG smart card reader. I guess depending what you're doing, you might have a smart card. I guess in Europe, those are popular for banking and so on.
Yep. But I don't use one of those. It's like...
Yeah.
mm.
But this one has a pin pad and allows you to enter the passwords and so on.
Okay.
And
yeah,
lastly, to run all this, they chose to use OpenBSD.
of course. Hence the OpenBSD workstation title.
Well, I think the URL actually said Linux, and they were talking about building the best Linux desktop. And it turns out the best Linux desktop is OpenBSD.
See? There's a twist.
Yep. So for Window Manager, they went with i3. They use OpenBSD's version of X11 called Xenokara. They customize the acceleration of their mouse however they want. Their application launcher is dmenu. They have their color profiles for their monitors. A screen magnifier, in case you need that. For screenshots, they use a program called MAME. Screen lock is SLock. Their terminal emulator is RxVT, or possibly URXVT, if you need Unicode. For a shell, they're using MKSH. VPN is OpenVPN. They have an RFC downloader that downloads all the RFCs so they can read them offline. For web browsing, they have NetSurf and Qt Browser. Their pipe text to clipboard tool is Xclip, and their to-do manager is Task Warrior.
Yeah, I've read about that. I just haven't gotten around to testing it for myself.
They have a, I'm guessing, curses-based calendar called CalCurse. An RSS reader, Newsboat. For email, they're using NeoMut. They have Password Store as their password manager, and GPG Agent, and so on. Using Jitsi for video chat, Mumble for audio chat, Psy for instant messenger, WeChat or HexChat for IRC. They're downloading the quarterly XML data dump of questions and answers from Stack Overflow, importing that into Postgres, and then mapping the help button on the keyboard to search for highlighted text. Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Might actually be useful to have on a laptop if you spend a lot of time on, say, airplanes without Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah, that you have the information available still.
Yeah. They also
all
have
these...
an offline version of Wikipedia with QX, and then they're using Kdenlive for video editing, and so on.
That's a long
All
list.
their other application choices are in there for you to take a look at.
And I guess most of them are available in ports or package source. Just don't need to pull up the stuff from GitHub and install it. Just use the ports that people have created. Yeah, it's quite a comprehensive setup here with all the stuff.
I might look into a couple of bits of software they picked out there.
Yeah, it's something. Oh, they are using some kind of software I haven't heard about. I should check this out. And then suddenly you are using this one and moving away from your old software that you used before. That's always good to see what people are using. So at conference,
like, I'm using QTerminal for my terminal emulator on my machine at the office, and there are one or two things I wish I could do that it can't. But at the same time, I've gotten used to the way it does a bunch of things, and I'm kind of happy with it. So we'll see.
Yeah. So at conference, sometimes I see people using some kind of strange software, and I walk over and, hey, excuse me, can you tell me what this software is? It looks interesting, and then people start talking about it, and yeah, it's a good way of talking to people and getting introduced. All right.
This week's episode of BSD Now is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Head over to digitalocean.com, and you can sign up and spin up a FreeBSD powered droplet in under 55 seconds.
Yep, in the DigitalOcean cloud, and it's super fast and easy to set up, and you're running some kind of software on it or your favorite operating system, and they have some prepackaged software for you. So if you want to run a WordPress blog, or you want to try out MongoDB or some other things, they have some things that you can just, with the click of a mouse, set up for your droplet, and then you can use it right away without having to set it up manually, because they did most of the stuff for you. They also have team support, so you can share your virtual machine with a couple of people, and they can do various things together, see also the dashboard, what the machine is doing, and what kind of CPU load it currently has. So you can use one account for multiple teams as well, which is kind of cool, because you have only to manage a single login, and everyone on your team can access up to 10 teams. That's kind of a nice feature.
Yes, that's super useful, because in addition to the Scale Engine team, where we need multiple people to have access, but I do the invoicing. I'm also part of a couple of teams for other things, and being able to keep those all separate is really helpful for me.
Oh yeah. And they have these droplets in various sizes, so depending on your needs, you can start with a smaller one and then size it up if your load increases.
You can start as small as the $5 a month one, which is pretty much everything you need to get started with FreeBSD. Or they have $10 or $15 or $20, depending on what your needs are. The new $15 one is a very interesting offering, because you get quite a bit more RAM than anything else at that price level, but without having to buy a bunch of extra CPU or disk that you might not need.
Oh yeah, definitely. And most things,
if you end up thinking you need a lot more disk, they offer block storage as a separate feature where you just pay per gigabyte, and you can grow it over time.
Yeah, so you can see whether your droplet is using more and more resources. You can size this up as demand increases. The monitoring is also nice. They can tell you exactly, what your CPU did last Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the morning, or in the evening actually, and they provide you a little dashboard. They will also plot how much bandwidth you're currently using, and your top processes and memory hogging, if there are any processes. So there's a bunch of stuff they will display in their nice little web-based dashboard for you.
Yep. And they also offer high memory and high CPU instances. So if you need more of those features and less of the other, then you can do that without having to spend as much money. And all of them are actually billed hourly with a discount for using the whole month, meaning that, right now we're recording this and it's December 20th. If you sign up and start using it, when the end of December comes around, you're not going to pay the whole monthly price. You're going to pay for the number of hours you actually used. Just there's a limit. If you use more hours than what their monthly fee is, they'll charge you just the lower amount.
Yeah, it's that simple. And that actually gets people interested in trying out their feed in the cloud world, and figuring out what works and how they can make use of this.
It's a great way to get to play with FreeBSD on a machine with fast internet connection, and that isn't your only computer. Anyway, head over to DigitalOcean.com, sign up, check them out. Use the coupon code FreeBSDNow, and it'll add an extra $10 to your account, and you can, play with or learn FreeBSD with a little gift from us.
Yep. All right. Our next story is what have we learned from the PDP-11? So this is less of a BSD story, but we thought this would be interesting enough for our listeners that this old machine that had so much history now should have a little mention on our show as well.
Well, it's also the machine that Unix was invented for, so...
Yeah, so there's still a connection
there.
There's
a strong BSD connection in this one, which we'll get to a little bit later. Yeah. But yes, so this is an overview on somebody's blog of a series of papers written by the people that worked on the PDP-11 after the fact, looking back at what they learned from the process. Mm-hmm. So the lead author of this one was C. Gordon Bell, who said, in the 6 years that the PDP-11 has been on the market, more than 20,000 units in 10 different models have been sold. Although one of the original system design goals was a broad range of models, the actual range of 500 to 1 in cost and memory size has exceeded the design goals. You can get it a 1 size one or a 500 size one. They have all these different sizes depending on how much money and how much memory you need. They say the PDP-11 was designed to be a small computer, yet its design has been successful, exceeding to high performance models. This paper recollects the experiences of designing the PDP-11, commenting on its success from the point of view of its goals, its use of technology, and on the people who designed, built, and marketed it. And they have the citation here for the 4 different papers they're actually talking about, including a new architecture for mini computers, the DEC PDP-11, the computers that we have, or computers, what have we learned from the PDP-11, the VAX 11780, our virtual address extension to the DEC PDP-11 family, and retrospective, what have we learned from the PDP-11, and also what have we learned from VAX and Alpha, which even is 20 years later than the other one. So this year marks the 60th anniversary of the founding of the company that produced the PDP-11. And it's also 40 years since the first paper was written. So I thought it would be entertaining to review Bell's retrospective thoughts on with a lens of our new 2020 hindsight.
Mm-hmm. And the question, of course, comes, who were Digital Equipment Corporation? So to set the scene for this paper, or for the actual article here, we should talk a little about the company that produced the PDP-11, the Digital Equipment Corporation of Maynard, Massachusetts, better known as DEC. Yep. So that was founded by...
It's worth noting that the name PDP is actually an acronym for Programmed Data Processor, as at the time, computers had a reputation of being large, complicated, and expensive, and DEC's venture capitalists would not support them if they were going to build a computer. So they built a data processor instead.
Okay. Yeah, so these were the origins. They talk a little bit about, the founders and where it got started. So 1957 was the beginning of Digital Equipment Corporation, and that got started. There's a bunch of pictures here, so you can get the idea what it looked like back then and what the office environment looked like back then. So that's kind of an interesting history trip.
Yeah. They say, a computer is not solely determined by its architecture. It reflects the technology, economic, and human aspects of the environment in which it was designed and built. The finished computer is a product of the total design environment. And so the author of the blog post comments, right from the get-go, Bell is letting us know that the success of any computer project is not abstractly building the best computer, but building the right computer for that time. And that takes context.
Yeah.
And so they talk a little bit about the context, and they say, this is a picture of the TX-0. Something you might notice about it is that it's like the size of 6 rack units, like 6 whole racks. It's, that's not a small computer there. And they say, let's compare that to an IBM 704, which only took up like an entire desk rather than an entire room.
That's already an improvement, yeah.
And they talk a bit about that. But anyway, they say, it's in the nature of computer engineering to be goal-oriented with pressure to produce deliverable products. It is therefore difficult to plan for an extensive lifetime for a product because you mostly have to worry about what it's going to do now and, how we're going to sell it now so that there is a future at all, rather than we're going to make this decision because in the future it'll work out better, right? So it's always that dichotomy of the right computer for now and the right computer for a long time for the architecture.
Yeah. Yeah, these were the early days of computing. I mean, this is just beginning.
The other interesting point they were saying is, because of the open nature of the PDP-11, anything that interpreted the instructions according to the processor specification was a PDP-11. So there was a rush within DEC, once it was clear that the PDP-11 market was heating up, to build implementations. So you had different groups building fast and expensive computers, and another group building cost-reduced slower computers. All of them being PDP-11s because they could run PDP-11 software. But it's interesting getting to that concept of having an open architecture that anybody can build a computer that is a PDP-11 kind of thing. So then, to get into what we actually learned from the design of the PDP-11, talk a little bit about the actual challenges faced when designing a computer. So they say, the first weakness of mini-computers was their limited address space. The biggest and most common mistake that can be made in a computer design is that of not providing enough address bits for memory addressing and management. We learned that one the hard way with x86, didn't we?
Yeah, it's history repeats itself sometimes, but way back when it was already a known problem. So the second weakness, they said, of mini computers is their tendency to not have enough registers. So this was corrected for the PDP-11 by providing 8 16-bit registers, and later 6 32-bit registers were added for floating point arithmetic. So that's already a bit more improvement. So more registers would even increase the multi-programming context, switch time, and confuse the user. So suddenly
they didn't
this
want
machine...
to get too many registers, but they wanted more. Some of the other computers at the time would have, say, one register, an accumulator, and that's it. So having 8 or 6 was a big improvement, right?
That's something you would brag about. It's like, oh, look at the number of registers we have.
But the last thing saying, more registers would increase the multi-programming context switching time. So that's, if you're going to have 2 different processes, you have to save the registers off, load the saved registers from the other program, let it run, and then switch back and forth, right? As you're going to have multiple processes sharing the same processor. But it was interesting that they noted that the registers, which is a very low-level concept, would confuse the user. And the comment from the blog here is, it's interesting to note Bell's concern that additional registers would confuse the user. In the early 1970s, the assumption that the machine would be programmed directly in assembly was still the prevailing mindset. So when they're designing this, they're designing it for the user of this computer is going to program it in assembly. That's a lot different than the world we live in now, or even kind of where the PDP-11 ended up. So they say the third weakness of mini computers was their lack of hardware stack capability. In the PDP-11, this was solved with the auto-increment, auto-decrement addressing mechanism. This solution is unique to the PDP-11 and has proven to be exceptionally useful. In fact, it was then copied by other designers. The blogger comments, nowadays it's hard to imagine hardware that doesn't have a notion of a stack, but considering that a stack isn't important if you don't need recursion. The design of the PDP-11 was laid down in 1969, and if we look at the programming languages at the time, like Fortran and COBOL, neither supported recursive function calls. The function call sequence would often store the return address at a blank word at the start of the procedure, making the recursion impossible. It's interesting how things evolved. So a fourth weakness was the limited interrupt capability and slow context switching, and that was essential to solving, or that was essentially solved with the device, the Unibus that they designed at DEC, and using interrupt vectors with direct device interrupts. The basic mechanism is very fast, requiring only 4 memory cycles from the time of interrupt request is issued until the first instruction of the interrupt routine begins execution. So when a device needs attention from the CPU, it gets it rather quickly and doesn't involve as much context switching. There's lots of more detail about that in the article. We can't go through all of it, but they say a fifth weakness of prior mini computers was inadequate character handling capabilities, and that was it was met in the PDP-11 by providing direct byte addressing capabilities. So before that, strings and characters handling were of increasing importance during the 1960s as scientific and business computings converged. The predominant character encoding at the time was 6-bit character sets, which provided just enough space for uppercase characters, the letters 0 through 9, or sorry, the digits 0 through 9, a space, and a few punctuation characters sufficient for printing financial reports. Right, and that's why old mainframes only supported uppercase. They did 6-bit characters, so they only had, 64 possible combinations, And by the time you get the whole alphabet and everything else in there, then
So if you
don't
see
have very much
people
left.
shouting in the chat room, they may still be writing on their PDP-11. No, that's unlikely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but there were more
Anyway,
problems.
because memory was so expensive, placing one 6-bit character in a 12 or 18-bit word was simply unacceptable. So characters would be packed into words. This proved efficient for storage, but complex for operations like move, compare, and concatenate, which would have to account for a character being in, the beginning or the end or the middle of a word, or I guess the top or bottom of the word, as they said, which would expend valuable words of program storage to cope with that. So with the PDB, you could address individual bytes instead, and then it would have the null byte to indicate the end. So they said the problem with addressing in the PDP-11, the problem was addressed in the PDP-11 by allowing the machine to operate on memory as both a 16-bit word and the increasingly popular 8-bit byte. The expenditure of 2 additional bits per character was felt to be worth it for simple string handling, and also eased the adoption of the increasingly popular 7-bit ASCII standard, of which DEC was a proponent at the time. Bell concludes at this point with a throwaway line. Although string instructions were not yet provided in the hardware, the common string operations, like move, compare, and concatenate, can be programmed in very short loops. And they have some example code for that in here. You say, one can write a string copy routine using just 2 instructions, assuming that the source and destination are already in registers. So you just move from the source to the destination, and then loop if it's not equal 0. And this is the routine takes full advantage of the fact that the move instruction updates the processor flag. The loop will continue until the value at the source address is 0, at which point the branch will fall through to the next instruction. And this is why C strings are terminated with 0. So in case you've ever wondered about that. The 6th weakness of minicomputers was the inability to use read-only memories, and this was avoided in the PDP-11. Most code written for the PDP-11 tends to be pure and reentrant without special effort by the programmer, allowing a read-only memory, or ROM, to be used directly. And that kind of gets into our 7th weakness, which was primitive I/O capabilities. Back then, I/O maybe shunted off to a separate processor that did the work, and then eventually told you when it was. But in the 60s, when the PDP-11 was being designed, input and output was very expensive. Mainframes at the time used a model called channel I/O, where the main CPU sent a small program to a channel controller, which would execute the program and report the result. That program would usually instruct a tape drive to load a specific record or a punch to punch a specific card.
Yeah, those
talk
were
lots
days.
more about that, but we don't need to get into that.
Yeah, there's some pictures there, of course, and there's also mentioned, what the actual learning was. So, of course, there's a section about Unix and the BSDs, which would come later, but also was important that the PDP-11 played a role in there.
Yeah. So the 9th weakness of minicomputers, and the article skipped 8, not me. Anyway, the 9th weakness of minicomputers was the high cost of programming them. Many users program in assembly language without the comfortable environment of editors like file systems, or of editors, file systems, and debuggers available on a bigger system. The PDP-11 does not seem to have overcome this weakness, although it appears to be more complex systems are still being built successfully with the PDP-11 than with its predecessors like the PDP-8 and PDP-15. But because of their minimal nature, minicomputers were not pleasant environments with which to write code. Often this would involve tedious switch flipping or perhaps editing and assembling a program on another larger computer and then transferring it via paper tape to the PDP. and so on.
Yep.
Uh,
Those. I mean,
let's see,
inexperience is like, if you've been just developing these computers who were new at the time, what would you get from experience? You didn't have anything you built because it was all new.
The problem faced by computer designers can usually be attributed to one of two causes: inexperience or second systemitis. So if a mistake is made in a computer architecture, it's probably because it was the first one they built, or they had built one before and wanted to not make the same mistakes and overcomplicated it.
Mm.
So yes, the problem is either you've not done it before or that you have done it before.
Yeah,
One of
nowadays
those two
this would
things
be
will cause you to mess
NIH.
up the architecture of the next one.
Yeah. Or like nowadays it would be like, oh, we've done this before. Let's redo it one more time to make it really right this time. Okay, yeah.
It says, before the PDP-11, there was no Unix. Before the PDP-11, there was no C. This is the computer that C was designed for. If you want to know why the classic int in C is 16 bits wide, it's because of the PDP-11. Unix bought us ideas such as pipes, everything as a file, and interactive computing. Unix, which arrived at Berkeley in 1974 aboard a tape carried by Ken Thompson, would evolve into the West Coast flavored Berkeley system distribution. Berkeley Unix had been ported to the VAX by the start of the 1980s and was thriving as a counterculture alternative to DEC's own VMS operating system. Berkeley Unix spawned a new generation of hackers who would go on to form companies like Sun Microsystems and languages like Self, which led to Java. Unix was ported to a bewildering array of computer systems during the 80s, and the fallout from the Unix wars gave us the various BSD operating systems that continue to this day.
Yep.
So, the history of BSD is inextricably linked to the PDP-11.
Yeah, certainly. And there's also a mention of other operating systems there that had also, or that were also influenced by the PDP-11's design. But for this article, I mean, it's important to know where these origins are. And that
yes,
this
and
was
there's lots of great pictures of the Unibuses and PDP-11s and 8s and all the switches and stuff and spools of tape.
More memory.
Just the talk about RISC or reduced instruction set computers and how that was evolved out of the PDP, Unix, the VAX, BSD, Next, and its basis on 4BSD, Windows NT even, and its relation to VAX and so on, the Xerox Alto, the Data General Nova, and so on.
Yep. So that's certainly something people should read as a full article, and appreciate that machine.
And the full article has lots more detail and cites references from the 4 papers that have even more detail, and just you can never deal with the amount of stuff that's out there for this. But whatever amount of it you want to know, you can go there and dig into it, and you can keep going as much as you want. You're never going to have more information.
As deep and wide.
And cut. Need to open up some more tabs. That one. There are only 3 stories in the roundup?
Yep, because we cut the one, but The last
Yeah, but
one
we
is a
added
bit
the
more.
one, so I thought there were 4.
Yeah, but there's still enough material.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we didn't accidentally lose something.
No, I just killed the, or only killed the story we had already.
Aha! You did accidentally kill something that we didn't
Oh,
want to
did?
kill.
Oh,
Yes.
oops.
You killed the release engineering recap as well.
Aye, that was important. Ah, okay. Yeah, probably I must have mixed this up. with
Because
the-
you just saw FreeBSD Foundation and decided, nuke it.
And it's part of the article.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
nothing they write's ever any use. I apparently have lost. I closed the wrong window. Come on, scrolly, scrolly, scroll. Okay, got that, and then that, and that. Bit FreeBSD heavy at the end there, but that'll be okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That gives us better density anyway. Put that there, and this over here.
Hmm. Oh, we can read the questions and answer in like, I take the questions, you take the answers.
Yep. That will make it easier to understand.
Mm.
I do like it when it's possible to do that. Come on. Silly videos. Almost there.
Well, that's okay. Going to open up a bunch of those myself. Ooh.
Why are you making the text bounce as I'm trying to copy and paste it?
So that I get the links.
Hmm.
Okay, so for this add section, we add the stuff at the end of the document.
I don't know. He probably didn't know where it went, so he just stuck it at the end.
Okay. There's the okay.
Yes, the spot where it will actually go is already marked out as well.
Okay.
What the heck? All right, I solved that problem. Yeah, okay.
Oh, I got the date for the OSDC next week. It's the week after BSDCan in Berlin again. So not gonna happen. Difficult to get there without jet lag and all that.
Well, once you get home, it's the same time zone for you.
Yeah,
And I
for
don't
me,
have to
but yeah, but they have other conference.
Yeah. Get some other sucker.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well,
Sorry, what I meant by that was you and some other sucker rather than me.
yeah, I know. I got that one. It's just I just came back from the awesomeness of BSDCan needs to sink in a couple of days afterwards. So, and it would also require us to pre-record an episode, another
That's
one.
okay. Compared to what we did in like September and October, that's easy.
Yeah, we've been there, done that.
All right, ready?
Yep. Second part. Yep.
And recording.
It's time for our news roundup this week, starting with an article or a video section about two-factor authentication SSD with Duo in FreeBSD 11. So there's a video, but there's also an instruction below how to do this. And so this is basically a setup that uses SSH keys, as one should, as the first factor of authentication. So no keyboard interactive stuff, just SSH keys. And they have a video how to set that up if you don't know how to do this. But that's not the actual part of this document. It's talking more about the second part of the two-factor authentication, which is about using Duo push actually. So they start with, you should register first for a free account at duo.com and then install the Duo package on your FreeBSD server by just using package install Duo and confirm that, or use the -y switch, which will do it automatically. And then next you will then log into the Duo site and set your search path for Unix applications and then protect this application. So you need to set this up on their website. This will generate the keys we need to configure Duo. And so there's an integration key there and a secret key, which isn't shown here because it's supposed to be secret and you should never tell this to anyone else. And it's also, there's an API host name given. So after that, you edit the Duo configuration on your file, which is located in user local etc pam_duo.conf.
Yep, you put those 3 fields in there.
Yep, which you get from the website. And then change the permission, of course, so that no one else can access that file except you or the Duo application. And then once the permissions are set, you edit your SSHD config file, which is located under etc ssh sshd config, and then put in the stuff for...
Yep. You want to make it use PAM and set your authentication methods to support public key.
Since it's a PAM module, it needs to run PAM in order to call PAM to run the module. And then your configuration in PAM, be careful when you edit that. If you mess something up, then PAM will not run and you will not be able to access your machine from the terminal again. But that's just a friendly warning here. So you edit your PAM configuration to using the template they provided here. And they're pretty much calling or adding another auth method that's required to call user local lib security /pam_duo. That's the actual PAM module they need. And is there anything in the other session and password sections? No,
I don't think they've modified anything else. And so that way you'll require both the SSH key or password and the Duo auth.
Yeah, if you're confused by this, what required or sufficient means, then I suggest you check out Michael W. Lucas' book, PAM Mastery. That's where it's explained. But after you did all those changes, you should restart the SSHD service to make those changes take effect. And once you did that, you can SSH into your FreeBSD server and follow the link it outputs that enrolls your phone with Duo. So you do your regular SSH into your server. And then it will tell you, please enroll at HTTPS, the duosecurity.com API server, which will give you a code there. And that is what you need to do in order to access your server. So this is the second part of the two-factor authentication. And then you can SSH into your server again. And then it will display your, or a prompt for your passcode, or select one of the following options. The first one is used to do a push. The second one is getting a phone call to your phone that you set up with the Duo website. Or the third one is getting SMS passcodes to your phone. So you can choose one of these 3 options. And then after you chose your preferred method, it should log you into your server.
Yep. And that's all there is to it. All the complicated stuff is pretty much handled for you.
Yep, seems straightforward and easy enough to do, and adds a little bit more secure
exactly
server protections. And so people need to steal your phone and try to get the SSH keys for you, from you, which is difficult, or more difficult than the regular way. Okay, that's a nice thing. Our next
up, we have the release engineering recap for 2017 from the FreeBSD Foundation.
I should change my headgear one more time. It's becoming a regular thing now, actually.
Yes, they say, please take a minute to read up on the efforts of the FreeBSD release engineering team in 2017. Your support and donations help us fund a full-time release engineer to ensure on-time releases, provide better documentation, and facilitate getting others involved in the release engineering team. So they say, this past year was undoubtedly a rather busy but successful year in the release engineering team. Throughout the year, the development snapshots, builds for FreeBSD current and supported FreeBSD stable branches were continually provided so that people could run snapshots to, I used it many times to test out things on recent versions of Head without having to compile it myself and so on.
Yep.
In addition, work on packaging the base system using the package command continues throughout the year and remains ongoing. So we inch closer to being able to use the package system to maintain and update the base system as well. The FreeBSD release engineering team worked on the FreeBSD 11.1 release cycle, of course, with CodeSlash starting in mid-May, and the release stayed on schedule and was released July 21st, with the announcement going out July 25th. And it allowed us to build upon the stability and reliability of FreeBSD 11.0. Milestones during the 11.1 release cycle can be found on the 11.1 release cycle page. The FreeBSD release engineering team also handled the FreeBSD 10.4 release. That one was led by Marius Strobel. The 10.4 release cycle continued on schedule, with the only adjustment to the schedule being the addition of a beta 4 and the removal of a third release candidate. The FreeBSD 10.4 release builds upon the stability of 10.3 and is planned as a final release of the Stable 10 branch. And again, the full release schedule is available there. In addition to these releases, support for additional ARM single-board computers were added during 2017, including the Raspberry Pi 3 and the Pine 64. Additionally, release-related documentation effective for 12.0 point release and later has been moved from the base system repository to the documentation repository, because the way it currently works is when we make a release, it snapshots the base system repo, and it doesn't change except for security advisories. This means if someone finds a typo in the release docs after the fact, or if support for a driver changes or something, there wasn't really a way to update it because the docs were read-only at that point. Now that it's in the docs repo, which is versioned separately, it can be kept up to date and fixes can be made without having to violate the read-only nature of the source snapshots. Additionally, the FreeBSD release engineering team wrote an article in the handbook and it's been rewritten to outline the current practices used in release engineering team. More information on the procedures and processes of the FreeBSD release engineering team. There's that new article is available there, and will be continually updated as the process changes as it gets new abilities. And finally, following the availability of 11.1, Glenn Barber, the release engineer that works full-time for the Foundation, attended the September Developer Summit hosted at VBSDCon in Reston, Virginia, where he gave a talk comprising of the several points related directly to 11.1 release cycle. In particular, some of the points covered including what he felt went well during the release cycle and what didn't go as well as it could have, and what we as a project could do to better improve the release process. The slides from the talk are available on the FreeBSD wiki.
Yeah, so during the question and answer time following the talk, some questions asked included the following ones. Should developers use the rel nodes tag in a Subversion commit template more loosely at risk of an increase in false positives?
Glenn said, when asked when a tag in the template was initially added, the answer would have been no. However, in hindsight, it's easier to sift through the false positives than to comb through months and months or years of commit logs and try to decide what should go in the notes. So yes, the release engineering would prefer that people err on the side of verbosity in marking things as should be noted in release notes. So please feel free to mark things. If you think it might make sense in the release notes, say yes, and they can decide to not bother with it later. Whereas otherwise, they have to dig for that commit through thousands or hundreds of thousands of other commits to decide if it should go in the
notes. What issues are present preventing moving release-related documentation to the documentation repository?
Glenn's answer was, there were some rendering issues last time, and those are being investigated. It is nothing more than taking the time to fix those and some build system fixes. And that since that talk, the migration has been completed. So, yeah, all done.
Check. That's done. Yeah. Does it make sense to extend the time frame between milestone builds during the release cycle from 1 week to 2 weeks to allow more time for testing, for example, RC1 versus RC2?
That question sounds vaguely familiar because I think I asked it. The answer was no. It would extend the length of the release cycle with no real benefit between milestones, since as we draw nearer to the end of a release cycle, the number of changes in the code base is significantly reduced. And yes, I think based on a discussion we had at the Developer Summit a couple months later, that the best solution is to do releases more frequently so that the total number of changes is smaller. And that's the same reason why having the short amount of time between release candidates is fine, because the number of changes between RC1 and RC2 should be less than 5, and so it shouldn't take that much testing.
Yep. And of course, if you like what we're doing here in the release engineering section, and that we still be able to continue the release engineering process, give us feedback and say thank you actually to the release engineering team. It's not just Glenn Barber, but also a lot of people less in the spotlight that are also helping in the release engineering process and make sure that we have releases every year and releases that have a certain quality to it. And if you want to continue that we have a paid release engineer on the FreeBSD Foundation, then there's still time to donate. We are a little bit short on our goal of this year. So if you like what we're doing, then send us a little money over. It will certainly go to a good cause.
Yes, it'd be great to get the, specifically the number of donors is a bit lacking this year. We would like more individual donors. So even just throwing $5 or $10 in from the donate link would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that goes a long way. All right. Time to mention our second sponsor for this week in this episode. It's, of course, IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com for your next server that you're planning to build for your open source project or a certain solution that they can build for you, because they have built thousands of systems for big data, for cloud usage, for finance, education, and it's the formula is basically you tell them what you not what you want to have as a component list necessarily, but what kind of problems you want to solve. So you say, I want to build a storage server for my I don't know, my data science project that I'm doing, and I need a certain number of I/O, or I need a certain number of disks, and I need a certain CPU. What can you build me, or what kind of systems would you build for this specific purpose? They might have some additional questions for you, but they will, at the end, provide you with a system that's best suited to solve your specific problem in that area. They also have, of course, other systems as well, starting from the lower range. If you're looking for just a desktop backup solution like a FreeNAS Mini or the Mini XL, this is something that you can use right away, or for your home use, where you can store your backup safely and make sure that your data is still stored in in a number of years, because most of these systems are using ZFS in the background, all the way up to big high-end servers, to high-density filers, rack-mounted servers, also to the TrueRack, which is a full, powerful rack-scale architecture that will provide a certain way of providing CPU and storage power for your needs in case you need that. So all these things can be built by IX Systems, and Alan can tell you a lot about their white glove support.
Yeah, whether it's just a hard drive that eventually fails and getting advanced replacement on that, so that it shortens the amount of time that your ZFS pool is vulnerable because you're in reduced redundancy because one of the hard drives is missing, or if it's, ship this server to a data center I've never been to in a country I don't live in, and make it so that the people there just plug in the power and the Ethernet and it just works. They've got you covered all the way, from pre-sales, where they actually have salespeople that know what ZFS is and know which SSD to tell you to buy, and through getting the machines custom built the way you want and getting the software on it set up the way you want so that they can just deploy easily, all the way through, I bought the system 2 years ago and now there's a problem, help me fix it. And this week on their blog, they have a year in review for the TrueNAS. And as we wrap up 2017, they're looking at some of the interesting things that happened there. They released the new ES60 expansion shelf, which is a SAS3 12 gigabit per second way of adding up to 60 2.5 or 3.5 inch drives in 4Us to your existing machines. And they
Cool.
walk through some of the other products in the TrueNAS line.
Hmm.
And
They also have, oh, look, they have something new on their blog as well.
oh,
Uh,
and then in July of 2017, they added the with TrueNAS 11, they added the ability to create cloud and object storage in S3-like environments on the TrueNAS.
mhm. Yeah, so it seems like they have had a successful year.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only guess what they're coming up with new things in 2018.
Yeah, should be good.
Yep. So check out ixsystems /BSD now for your little PDF that you can download for free as a server buying guide with questions that you should ask your other vendor, whether they have the same amount of support or whether they care as much about open source as ixsystem does. And you probably find that they...
I bet if you look, they haven't been to as many BSD conferences as IX has. Just saying.
Yeah, so this is it's a good indicator of where they will focus their efforts. All right. Running up with our next stories about Flimp, which sounds kind of weird, but it's actually a GIMP exploit on FreeBSD. So this is over at the Fuzzing Dash project, which has the AFL. People have heard about the American Fuzzy Lop. And this is something specific for GIMP, the graphics editors, or the graphics program. So it's beginning with what's going on, actually. So in 2014, actually, they started a fuzzing project, and they did some primitive fuzzing on GIMP and reported 2 bugs there. They weren't fixed and were forgotten in the public bug tracker, which always happens, or ever so often. And apparently recently, Tobias Stöckmann found one of these bugs. There's a CVE number here, and figured out that it's easy to exploit. And so this goes back and forth in the kind of a questions and answer section here. So apparently this is bad enough to mention it. So what kind of bug is this actually? So it's apparently a classic heap buffer overflow in the Flick parser. And Flick is the actual file format for animations and was introduced by Autodesk Animator. So this is something that GIMP provides.
Sounds like a rather old file format.
Yeah, something that's not been used that often. There's
a link to a detailed write-up on how the exploit actually works. And they talk a bit about it. It says, the exploit doesn't work for me. And we figured out that it's unreliable and that memory addresses are depended on many different circumstances. The exploit zip comes with 2 variations using different memory addresses. Try both of them. We also noticed that putting the files in a subdirectory sometimes made the exploit work, where in other times it wouldn't. They also say there's a wide variety of graphic formats in GIMP. GIMP tries to support many of them, including many legacy formats that no one uses anymore. While there's obvious advantages to this, you can access the old images and so on, it comes with a risk. Support for many obscure file formats means that many parsers that hardly anyone ever looks at are in your program and could end up with exploits like this, right? So then they asked, what about other parsers? And so they quickly found a second bug, an overread where you read past the end of a buffer in the TGA parser. And they also found buffer overreads in the XCF parser, the GIMP brush parser, and the PaintShop Pro parser. And they found a heap buffer overflow in the PaintShop Pro parser as well. So basically, the GIMP import parsers are full of memory safety bugs. And so there's lots more to be found with fuzzing tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a lab last year about this in my Unix class. So I gave them an obviously wrong error, and they should run the AFL program on that and see what the problem is, and then actually fix it. So this was kind of an interesting experience. But then I found people were more fighting with the fuzzer tool, getting it to work rather than concentrating on fixing the bug. But it's still something people should check out and fuzz their own programs. Maybe they can find something they didn't consider doing the initial programming.
Yep. So they say, how did you find these bugs? They say, with some effort, it's possible to use American Fuzzy Lop, a state-of-the-art fuzzing tool, together with Address Sanitizer to fuzz GIMP. This is not straightforward. GIMP's import plugins are separate executables. Crashing them doesn't crash the main program. The fuzzing process is very slow. We have some ideas on how to improve that. We wanted to submit a fuzzing tutorial to the GIMP wiki. However, our attempts to get an account on the GIMP wiki were as successful as our attempts to get the bugs fixed in the first place. For now, the tutorial lives over here. So if you're interested in getting started with fuzzing GIMP, then they have a tutorial for that as well. So they say, what now? Our attempts to communicate with the GIMP developers have been met with silence. Some of the bugs reported have patches attached. Some of them haven't been applied yet. We also tried contacting the GNOME security team. They tried to help, but weren't successful either. We get the impression that security is not a priority for GIMP, or maybe there's just not very many active GIMP maintainers at the moment.
Yeah, that is often a problem. People don't have the time to get to these bug fixes, even though they are in the bug tracker, and just need to apply them.
Well, and the other thing is that maybe the people working on GIMP are focused on the graphics elements of it, and maybe are not very comfortable trying to deal with the security elements. But there aren't any security people working on GIMP because it's not really a security-related tool, and it can definitely be the kind of problem you get with open source projects like this, where when the developers only work on the parts that they're interested in, there can be parts that nobody's interested in.
Yeah, this is, I mean, security is an overarching issue for pretty much everyone, but it's less of a focus in other projects because they want to get to the next version that has features that the actual software, implements. But yeah, it's certainly something that people should be aware of.
So they mention they believe the way GIMP plugins work is not ideal for security testing. The plugins are separate executables, however, they can't be executed on their own. They have to communicate with the main GIMP process. Ideally, either these plugins should be changed in a way that they are run directly from the command line or are turned into a library that is used by the application. That way, you could run them standalone and run them through the fuzzer without having to run GIMP and so on. The latter would also have the advantage of taking the parser code usable for other software. Right? We end up with a library that processes each of those image formats that can be used for things other than GIMP, instead of GIMP having their own parser for it and then also having somewhere else in open source, there's an open source library that does the parsing. They also noted that GIMP makes use of the EXIV2 tagging library, which has its problems, and some unrelated or unfixed security bugs. And they also think that GIMP should think about the security of their downloads. Apparently there's some issues there. And then lastly, they discovered Flick. Haven't we heard of this before? And apparently GStreamer recently also had a serious issue with the same parser. Again, two different implementations of the parser, and they both have a problem. Maybe a library is the right answer.
Yep, that could be the solution for that. Cool. So that's all about this topic here.
Yep, there's links if you want more details, or if you want to get into the tutorial and start doing fuzzing on your own, and so on.
Okay. All right, our next story is the Dell FS12-NV7 review. So bargain ZFS, FreeBSD on ZFS box. So apparently this is a migration story of some sort.
It's a cheap machine to buy to run ZFS.
Ah, excellent. Okay, so it starts off with, it seems just about everyone selling refurbished data center kit has a load of Dell in that FS12-NV7 to flog. Dell FS what? You won't find them in the Dell data catalog, that's for sure. They look a bit like C2100s of some vintage, and they have a lot in common. But on close inspection, they've obviously a special for an important customer. Given the number of them knocking around, it's obviously a customer with big data centers stuffed full of servers with a lot of processing to do. Here's a hint. It's not Google or Amazon. So who you should be buying, that could be the next logical company you would name. So what should be buying a weirdo box with no documentation whatsoever? So I'd say yes, apparently. So if you're interested in anything like this one, it's a 2U box. You can get twin 4-core CPUs and 64 gig of RAM for less than 150 pounds, or yeah, around this number. Oh, that's quite cheap actually. So what's not to like about this? Yes, the complete lack of documentation. Over the next weeks, Frank Leonhardt, who has this on his blog, intends to cover that. And to start off, this is his first PC review for nearly 20 years. So there's a picture here from the open box, how it looks like from the inside. And so as he mentioned, it's a 2U full-length heavy metal box on rails. On the back, there's the I/O ports, so you can see a 9-way RS-232, VGA, yes, VGA, this clunky little thing, no HDMI
pretty much
there.
all servers still have VGA because that's what the
Yeah.
crash cards at the data center have.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, but it's not what your typical desktop machine would have. So yeah, it has two 1 gigabyte Ethernet ports, also two USB 2, and a PS2 keyboard and mouse. Front is also taken up by 12 3.4 hard drive bays. So this is the thing where you put in your storage disks, and has status indicator and power button. So all the things you need to check the status and make it run, of course. And unlike other Dell servers, all the connections are on the back only, so nothing on the front. So in summary, he writes, you're getting a lot of your money if it fits the kind of thing you want, and it's ideal as a high-performance Unix box with plenty of drive bays, preferably running BSD and ZFS. In this configuration, it really shifts. So major bang for your buck. You get a lot of CPU power for your money here. Another idea that he had is using it for a flight simulator. It has a lot of RAM and processors for the money, and if you forgo the SAS controllers in the PCIe slot and dump on a decent graphics card and soundboard, it's hard to see that it could be anything better. And you get jet engine sound effects without a speaker. Yeah, if you run this thing, then there's certainly yeah. So who should buy one of these? So BSD geeks are the obvious answer, of course. With a bit of tweaking, they're a dream. It can build absolutely everything in 20 to 30 minutes. For storage, you can put the fast SAS drives in, and it goes like the wind. Even 3 gigabyte bandwidth per drive. Well, that's quite decent. I don't know if it works with FreeNAS, but I can't see why not. I'm using mostly FreeBSD 11.1, and the generic kernel is fine. If you want to run a load of weird operating systems, like Windows XP, in virtual machines, then it seems to work very well with the Zen hypervisor and DOM0 under FreeBSD, or CentOS if you prefer, or if you're that desperate. So there's a little bit of pros and cons listing here. So first of all, it's cheap. It also has a lot of CPUs and RAM, probably more than you need. Lots of HDD slots, so you can put a lot of disks in there to get your storage needs satisfied. It's a great box for BSD and ZFS or virtual machines, a lot of them, of course. The cons are actually that it's quite noisy, as we mentioned. It has no AES-NI support in the CPU, so if you're doing full disk encryption with Galley, there's not much.
Yeah, it's an older AMD Opteron CPU.
Yeah, that doesn't have that yet. It also, the SAS needs upgrading, so you need to spend a little bit more money there. And it has a limited number of PCI slots. But
yeah, it looks, on the motherboard, it looks like they never soldered on the connectors for the rest, so there's only the one. So that's limited expandability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and depending on what kind of...
but if all you're doing is trying to connect some disks to the network, seems like it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, surely. There's certainly something you can build out of this thing. And as mentioned, the noise and SAS are easy and relatively cheap to fix. And thanks to the Bitcoin miners of this world, even the PCI slot problem can be sorted. So he'll think about a later blog post covering, more things like installing this and starting your Z pools on this, which we'll cover in a future episode.
And cut. All right, I need a quick break, and then we can finish up.
Sure. I'll have the chat room all to myself.
Yeah. Be right back.
Okay. Dum, dum, dum. Dum, dum, dum. Yep. Cool. More and more stuff is happening. Yeah. This is the silent stream. Come on, you can listen to us all the time. You just want to have some silence here. Mm. Yeah, it's the silence that makes it all work.
And recording.
As every week, we have some Beastie Bits for you.
Actually,
Starting
hold on.
off,
Stop. Have
don't?
we already read
You
this?
don't have any Beastie Bits? Don't take our Beastie Bits away.
I'm just
Are we
concerned
missing?
that we've already covered this story.
About the hackathons.
Yeah.
It's from November, end of November, but from Bob Beck.
Mm-hmm.
So we had one where they had the hackathon in this remote lodge in the winter.
Yes, that's what this one's about. Just making sure we haven't read it before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my mistake.
Because I remember the picture they had taken in front of the, was it a hut or some kind of a
I think
ski
it was
lodge?
cottage type thing, yeah.
But this one doesn't have it, so it must be an older one.
Yeah, this is the one about, like, upgrading the laptop before you go or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is his personal report from
Yes, I swear that we covered this already. But I'm having some trouble finding where we did. I don't know.
Yeah, I should put up something like, we'll be right back. But this is it looks familiar enough.
Yes, I know I've read it before, and that's the part that's confusing me. Because the actual article link ID I cannot find in the show notes.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. This should be unique enough to find it. So it can, well, we only have to go.
Yeah, we don't have to go back very far because...
Yeah, because it's end of November, which means at least 3 episodes at most.
Yeah.
But
I suppose it's possible I just read it on its own.
Must have been a Beastie Bit also.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't.
So yeah, it would have to have been the one from the 29th if we did. Chug. Come on. Load faster. So many pages of show notes. 19 pages of show notes. Jesus. Apparently not. I don't know how I'm confused. But anyway.
Yeah, it's better to check.
Forge ahead.
Yeah. All right.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
And recording.
As every week, we have some Beastie Bits for you, starting off with reflections on hackathons. And if you hear hackathons, then you think OpenBSD, and that's correct in this case. So this is a story over at undeadly.org by Bob Beck. So he writes, so I'm sitting in my kitchen with a car packed full of food, packing up my last things and getting ready to drive south for a hackathon. This one is a little different. Since it is in a wilderness hut, I have to hike and ski to. If the hike doesn't kill me, living for 5 days inside a structure heated by wood where Germans are present to stoke the fire might. Oh, come on. We're quite good at stoking fires. So
I think that was his point, is that you were going to keep it too warm in the little hut and he was going to bake to death.
Oh well. Okay, so there's a bit of a ramble about hackathons. So it's also a love letter to our intrepid ports people and install scripts/sysmerge people. You know who you are. In the bad old days of helping Theo pull one of these off, I would fret over dragging a ton of gear down to work on a truck full of servers, and even then fretting over net access, how to build and check out, and how much infrastructure would be required to make a useful place where people can hack. I would go down a day before and spend a day setting up servers and copies of repositories and all manner of craziness. The fact that we can now do this with minimal gear and a satellite network connection is pretty cool. Notwithstanding that, it still amazes me that in the last few years how stressless my laptop before a hackathon has been. In the bad old days, where there has been much pre-building and gnashing of teeth and ensuring everything was right, so I wouldn't end up with a screwed up system on a hackathon and wasting tons of time on it. So he'd spend tons of last-minute fretting time worrying about the state of my machines before he left the house. So nowadays, he writes, it's pretty easy. I make sure I have the latest snapshot and run on an upgrade. Sysmerge takes care of the rest. I reboot, make sure I have a locally synced CVS repo, and run package_add-UI. I know I'll be able to run builds and more that likely nothing will be screwed up. I can take one laptop and not worry about things. I'll be running current and I'll just work. And I'll be able to work and don't worry about having a laptop that's so boned I can't work. Considering I'm running the latest development head of an operating system, I think that's pretty damn cool.
Nobody tell him about boot environments.
Yeah, it's the next thing you would put on top of that.
Yeah,
but certainly,
yes, it's
much easier
a
to
lot
work.
less worry now. And then with ZFS and boot environments means I can have the last 3 head development snapshots on my laptop. So if the newest one does have a problem, I can roll back quickly. Or multi-boot, FreeBSD 10.4, 11.1, and head, or whatever I want to do. It's just so nice.
Mm. Yeah, certainly this is a nice story. And I mean, all these OpenBSD hackathons throughout the years are amazing, and the stories they write about it is certainly interesting to get into the feel of how this must be.
Yeah. And from the people that brought us the Duo SSH authentication story earlier, we have a 7-part video crash course in using SaltStack on FreeBSD.
Oh yeah, so this is a video course on YouTube. And yeah, this is covering basically how you get started with that and what actually SaltStack is and what it does. So people could watch this if they have some quiet time ahead. And so the 7-part video crash course will introduce you to SaltStack and what you can do to automate your infrastructure with it, and some of the specialties that SaltStack offers that you should be aware of, and the cool things you can do in terms of automation and deployment and making your life a little bit easier as a system administrator. We also have a bit about the LLVM threat sanitizer, which has been ported to NetBSD. I think this one we had. Let's see. Yeah, we mentioned this last time where we had some corrections here. So this is just a repeat. But it's fine. The next one is interesting. So this is over at Informatik Uni Stuttgart, which is a university down in Germany, southwest. This is Swabia. So it's about the first Unix port. So what's this all about? It's a paper.
So yeah, Unix was for the PDP-11, and so if you wanted to run on something else, you had to port it. And so they ported it to the Interdata 7/32. And talks about what effort was required to do that.
So there's a
And
5-page
about, porting the C compiler so that they can, and then making the Unix tools work on OS/32, and then making the Unix kernel work on the OS/32, etc.
Okay. So this is something people want to check out if they are, if
Yeah,
they
kind
didn't
of-
get enough from our PDP-11 part.
Yeah,
so
well, it's
this
like
is-
so that covers the PDP-11 where Unix was born, but then we had to port it from there.
to other architectures and interesting platforms. So yeah, this is certainly something people should check out. And yeah, maybe they get some more computer history this way.
Mm-hmm. Over in OpenBSD news, the ARM OpenBSD is now officially supported and even includes their syspatch support.
Ah, yeah, this is a nice connection here to Bob Beck's article. So yeah, this is ARM64 platform is now open for the OpenBSD developers to do some work on.
But basically it means they can provide the security updates and so on with it.
Without having to do the whole rebuild cycle and
yeah, especially
more
on like something like a Pine 64 where you don't have that much power.
Yeah, where the build would take days and just getting this installed in a couple of minutes by comparison is much better than the old-fashioned way. So now use syspatch if you're on OpenBSD ARM64, and that will get you there faster. And we also have reminders for upcoming conferences. So people who would think, well, this is in June, this is so far off. But no, we have call for papers open for BSDCan 2018. So BSDCan will happen next year, June 6th to the 10th. So mark your calendars if you haven't done already. And they still have their call for papers open. So if you haven't heard about BSDCan, and I cannot think anyone who listens to this podcast for a number of years now, it doesn't know BSDCan. But in case you don't, BSDCan is an enormously successful grassroots-style conference. It brings together a great mix of BSD developers and users for a nice blend of both developer-centric and user-centric presentations, food and activities. So 2 days of that will be tutorials from June 6th to the 7th. I also submitted one tutorial, so let's hope that will be accepted. And there's 2 days of conference after that on June 8th to the 9th. They are requesting proposals for talks now, and you can submit this. This doesn't have to be a academic or a more formal paper. It just want to have you submit your talk idea.
Yeah, you need like 2 paragraphs or something explaining what you're going to talk about, and then it'll get accepted and you show up and give the presentation. There's not much else to it. There's plenty more information on the website about it. Also, Michael Lucas has a great article on, he's one of the people on the program committee for BSDCan, and he talks a bit about, what types of things they're looking for in the proposal. But in general, it's tell us what you're going to tell people and why people coming to the conference will find this valuable.
Yeah. Make people excited about your...
Not everybody at the conference is a developer. There's a lot of users at BSDCan, and we'd love more content from users and for users.
Yeah, sysadmins, all kinds of crazy environments you're running BSD on. So this is certainly something you should submit to BSDCan next year.
Yes, and the other one is I would like to see some more talks from users to developers. It's like, as a user of FreeBSD, these are the things I think I would like the developers to fix or just to know about how non-developers use FreeBSD. If you're really that stuck for what to talk about, I think Benno Rice and I are trying to work up some ideas. So just ping me on Twitter or something, or email me, and I'd be happy to look at your submission before you send it or whatever, or spitball some ideas on what you could talk about if you don't know what to talk about.
And if it's your first time BSDCan, then you should certainly make an effort to be there.
Things to remember, the Thursday, so the 7th, there will be the newbie session, so make sure you're around in the evening. But also, there will be the Goat Boff on June 5th, the night before the tutorials and Dev Summit start. So if you're attending, you might want to make sure you actually get there early enough that you're awake to enjoy it all.
And this is, certainly has been the conference for many people to get into the BSD communities and get to know the people.
It's where I got my start. I came to my first BSDCan. It was so great that I submitted a paper for the next conference, which was EuroBSDCon, which I went to. And then that's where I learned about MeetBSD and got sucked into going to that. and I've basically been to almost everything since and presented in more countries than I can count on one hand anymore.
That's where it all started. Yeah.
Yep.
And while you're still thinking about your submission, you might as well submit that same proposal to Asia BSDCon 2018 because their call for papers is also open.
Yes, and you need to hurry up and get your proposal in. An extended abstract is needed right away, but you're going to need the whole paper by January 31st, so get that done. The requirement's a little higher in that because the conference takes place in Asia, where not everybody speaks English very well, they require an actual written paper, about 8-ish pages.
Around that, the proceedings.
Those all get collected and printed in the proceedings, which is this book you get, and it makes it much easier for attendees to go through the content, at their own pace. And reading is often a lot easier to deal with than trying to understand someone who's talking, especially when they're a bit nervous and talking a bit fast and so on. But
people do that.
Tokyo is amazing. You should totally come. And
Sure.
If you submit a paper, the conference pays for your flight. You can't get a better deal than that. So
yeah, this is a good trade-off for getting on the plane to get to Tokyo. It's certainly a good conference to be at, and it's the same way of introducing yourself or getting to know the developers. Alan and I will be there, so this is certainly a good way of saying hi to people and ask questions or, say thank you or things like that. It's a good way to get into your first BSD conference. Okay, now we should get into our feedback and questions sections, but before we should mention our sponsor for that part, which is Tarsnap.com. Have you heard about Tarsnap? Well, you certainly should have, because Tarsnap is the online backup for the truly paranoid. And when I mentioned backup, you're thinking, oh, I should have done that months ago. And this is a little bit late. So Tarsnap makes sure that you do backups, but you do it in a secure and proper way. So the backups are stored in the cloud, but before they are stored there, they're encrypted locally with a special key that only you know the actual decryption for. And then it will encrypt your files that you want to back up, and it stores in the Amazon AWS cloud, and no one else there can grab your files and get them decrypted because you're the only person holding the key. And Tarsnap makes it easy to handle those keys and doing the encryption and then doing all the communication with the cloud. And that makes it a nice backup solution for your important documents or certain things that you want to keep for a number of years or for a longer time, and make sure that you can retrieve them anytime disaster strikes or you accidentally delete them. So Tarsnap will make sure that you can get to those files as long as you don't delete the actual key to decrypt those files.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the little diagram says here. Alice does her hourly backup. She has 7.5 gigs of data, but it gets segmented and deduplicated. And it means there's only 2.2 megabytes of new data. That gets compressed to 0.81 megabytes of data. That then gets encrypted and sent. The bandwidth on that, being less than a megabyte, costs less than a cent. And then in total, he's got 15.8 gigabytes of data stored in the cloud, which adds up to $3.95. And so for less than $5 a month, secure backups that nobody else can read.
Yeah, so head over to tarsnap.com, and there's a bunch of clients for any kind of operating system under the sun, so there's no excuse not to use it or give it at least a try. All right, going into our feedback and questions section, this one is beginning with Sean. He has a Dragonfly BSD Vagrant image question for us, or wants to get some feedback. So he writes, I like experimenting with different Linux distros and BSD and even Illumos variants. Vagrant is a great tool for this kind of experimentation. A number of months back, he created a Vagrant box for Dragonfly BSD because no one else seemed to have done so. So while he was doing that, at the very tail end of a recent TechSnap, Dan mentioned the 5.0 release. he actually got pinged by a user on GitHub about his, at that time, out-of-date Dragonfly 4. Whatever box. So he's since created 4.8 and 5.0 boxes that listeners can be interested in and to try out that Dragonfly, see what kind of features that offers. So it's over at app.vagrantapp.com/B00GA for people who want to try this out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for
Very
sending
nice.
that in.
Okay. Next up is Ben with Under My Desk as a topic. So we had this a couple of episodes ago. He writes, "Hi, Alan Benedict. We're in response to the question episode 217 about the Under My Desk reference in the ntpconfig.h file. So he managed to find the following on a 2003 message on the FreeBSD current mailing lists. There's the link here. So there's the question, of course, what does i386 Under My Desk FreeBSD refer to and what it's used for? And the answer to that is apparently it is an inside joke by some FreeBSD developers that we keep alive on the 5 current branch. It isn't used in release branches. It was started by Alfred Perlstein and really came into life during the Spark 64 porting work. So there's a little snippet from, this is an IRC chat, I guess.
Yep.
So it's one person saying, I'm having a lot of trouble building World on my Spark Ultra. The other person says, you've got your Ultra on your desk, don't you? Whereas the first person says, yeah, and the second person then replies with, that's an unsupported configuration. Sorry. And that pretty much got to, it started a life of its own. And this is where the Under My Desk reference is coming from. Yeah, that's good to know. So this is a nice connection to that episode 217. So thanks for that. And next up is Ken with conferences. So he has a question, this one is, he really loves the show, he writes. It is my favorite and can't wait for it to come out each week. Same for us and many other people. So I would really love to attend a BSD conference, but I'm not sure which one should be a good one to start with. I'm a beginner in BSD, but I am learning fast. Is there any premier BSD conference that would be good for beginners with the operating system?
All of them are definitely open to that. I would suggest the best bet might be whatever one where the time of year works best for you and where maybe travel is the least expensive. If you live in North America, then BSDCan is probably cheapest, or MeetBSD if you're on the West Coast. If you're in Europe already somewhere, EuroBSDCon is going to be in Romania, so that would be less expensive than when it was in Paris and so on. So this year 2018 will be a really good year for that. And if you're in Asia, then AsiaBSDCon is less travel. All of them are definitely open to beginners. And we definitely see lots of sysadmin and user types, not just developers, at all of them as well. So I would say yes, whichever one's going to be the easiest for you to get to, I would say. And if that leads to a toss-up, then whichever one is sooner.
Yeah, certainly. And we have some smaller things, smaller meetups sometimes, some dev summits.
Yeah, but the bigger
as a conference
means more people and more people at your level. There are people at every level at all of the conferences.
Yeah, there's something for everyone in there. It's not just geeks talking all the time about obscure kernel data structures. Not just that, but also there are beginners who said, I just started with BSD, I got my first installation done, and there's certainly something that can appeal to everyone.
And it's just as helpful to the developers to have very new people around as it is for the very new people to have experienced people around.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information sharing, and how was your first install experience? Do you think we could do something better there, or other things you came up with that were confusing or didn't work as intended? So this is something where conferences actually get the most value from, or attending a conference.
I would say the one that's on your continent is probably the easiest, but you can look at the price and see which one will be easier for you to get to, and I don't know.
Yeah, the more conferences we'll be aware of. we'll mention it on the show anyway. So we'll keep people informed about new conferences that are in certain countries or certain areas of the world, so people can plan for that to attend.
BSDCan. See you there.
Yeah, we said it.
It's the soonest. But you know, if you happen to be from Europe, then EuroBSDCon might be easier for you.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, make sure to get to your conference, wherever that might be. The next one is, and last one also, is from Ben about SSH keys. He writes, you discussed the question about using SSH agent forwarding, which, as you discuss, is somewhat insecure as you are passing around keys. However, there's another method using SSH proxy command. I use it on a daily basis for my Linux and Mac workstations and servers. It's also more secure because it proxies the encrypted traffic to the middleman host, not passing your keys. I use this on a daily basis to access various hosts on non-routable addresses, such as on our corporate AWS account or his home lab. The gist below outlines the basics of using it in the SSH config file so that you can simply run SSH hostname in your terminal and have the proxy details handled automatically. It works fine on his Linux box and Mac systems, and it would only assume it would work well on BSDs too, since it's native SSH functionality that's pretty much the same everywhere, and he provides us with a link where people can read up about this.
Yeah, actually, we have a tutorial on the website on doing SSH with proxy command to do interesting stuff and having aliases for it as well. I use something like that in order to reach SSH to my router, which has publicly accessible SSH, and then bounce from there to boxes inside my house. Yeah, the tutorial is chaining SSH connections.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add a link to that into the show notes. But it shows how you can set up your proxy command and then make it so that you can just say SSH server, and it will know, oh, I'm going to jump to the jump host, and then once I'm there, I will chain through and SSH to the next thing. And even shows you how to set up recursive ones so that you can actually just say SSH host 1 plus host 2 plus host 3, and it will just SSH to 1, and then from there to 2, and from there to 3, making it even easier for you to chain through multiple machines.
Yeah, without having to do each individual SSH login on each new machine. Yep. Yeah, this is certainly a cool thing to know about and having set up, because the more Unix machines you're using, the more SSH jumping around you're going to do.
So yes, proxy command is definitely very useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So thanks for the link. And this is the end of our episode for this week. If you're having questions, comments, show notes, ideas, topics, send them to us at feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll cover it in a future episode. And since this is the pre-Christmas episode, we might as well wish you happy holidays. And yes, we'll be there between the years. We're not out of the country. So you get your regular weekly BSD dosage in our episode next week.
Yep, we'll still be around next week and the week after that too. So we need your feedback to keep making the show. So please send it in.
Yeah. And yeah, enjoy the holidays. Take some time off. Use, as Michael W. Lucas would say, spend some time in meat space, not in front of a machine. Spend some time with friends and family, and get some well-deserved off time if you're not on call, which we hope you aren't. Yeah. All right. See you next week.
And cut. And then we just need the cold open, where
yes,
you're going to sing. What?
No, I'm not singing. It's just a rhyme, but
sure, that works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a new thing I'm trying. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. 'Twas the episode before Christmas when all through the house not a keyboard was clicking, not even a mouse. The stories were ordered in the show notes with care in hopes that BSD Now would soon be there. In this week's episode of BSD Now, we cover True OS Stable 17.2, the new release. We also have an OpenBSD workstation guide for you. We also teach you what learnings from the PDP-11 got into the latest systems we have nowadays. And we show you FreeBSD 2017 release engineering recap as well as a Duo SSH setup in this week's episode on BSD Now. Yeah, see? Haha.
All right, it's dinner time.
Oh yes, you need to get something to eat, and I can get some sleep.
I could use some more of the sleep too.
So I overslept actually today, which is
Oh, I underslept today.
Yeah, that's what usually happens. But I haven't overslept in a while, so I'm not sure how this got happened. But I probably didn't sleep on the other the day before today enough, so this might be a factor in there.
All right then.
Yeah, so Merry Christmas to you as well, Alan.
Thank you.
And,
We'll see you next week.
sure, in the old freshness, and yeah, with some new gifts and whatever I'm getting, I'm not sure. We'll see. It's an exciting time. All right, enjoy. Give some, take some time off, whatever you plan to do. Yeah, that's all. All right, take care.
That's not right. What's going on here? Oh, that one's... ...225 episodes in the can. Excuse me.